The Great Galactic Study, a scientific investigation into human dangerousness. Official report to the Galactic Council of Sciences by Professor Quix Brightbeam, PhD, SCD, OPD researcher, Department of Xenoanthropology, University of Greater Centauri. Let the record show that I, Professor Quix Brightbeam, never wanted this assignment. I was perfectly content studying the mating rituals of crystalline beings in the Andromeda Galaxy. But no, the Galactic Council had to go and declare humans a matter of urgent scientific inquiry. And suddenly I'm being shipped off to some backwater research station orbiting Earth because I'm the foremost expert in dangerous species research. I must note that my previous work primarily involved studying creatures that accidentally dissolve their mates during courtship. Humans, as far as I'm aware, do not regularly dissolve their partners. Though after 3 months of studying them, I'm beginning to think that might be simpler to understand. The project started, as most disasters do, with a committee meeting. Picture, if you will, the most prestigious gathering of scientific minds in the galaxy, all crammed into a room designed for beings half their size, because apparently the Galactic Council's budget doesn't extend to proper furniture. Professor Brightbeam Council members Zix began, their fluorescent tentacles pulsing with what I recognized as bureaucratic satisfaction. We need you to determine exactly what makes humans so dangerous. I adjusted my sensory appendages and asked the obvious question, what evidence do we have that they're dangerous at all? The council exchanged looks. You haven't seen awkward until you've watched a group of beings, some with eyes on stalks and others with no eyes at all, try to share meaningful glances. Well said, Council Member Floupety. Yes, that's their actual name. And no, I'm not translating it wrong. They survived multiple extinction-level events. So did cockroaches, I pointed out. They developed space travel before achieving world peace. That's just poor project management. They intentionally consume substances that cause pain for pleasure. The capsaicin thing? That's just. They drink poison for breakfast and call it a morning pick-me-up. That one gave me pause. Wait, what? And thus began the most bizarre research project of my career. The council assigned me a team of experts, though I use that term loosely. There was Dr. Pip, a psychological profiler who specialized in predictable species and spent most of their time muttering about how humans defied every behavioral model. Dr. Wurble, our chief of security, insisted on installing 17 different types of containment fields before we'd even met a human. And then there was Trevor, our AI assistant, who developed an existential crisis after trying to calculate the probability of human actions and kept crying about chaos theory. We set up our research station in Earth orbit, disguised as a malfunctioning weather satellite. Humans have so many of those, they didn't even notice one more. Our mission was simple: observe humans in their natural habitat, document their dangerous behaviors, and determine if they posed a threat to galactic society. The first week was spent just arguing about safety protocols. Dr. Wurble wanted to conduct all observations from behind quantum-hardened blast shields. Dr. Pip suggested we study humans only while they were sleeping, which led to an hour-long debate about whether humans were more or less dangerous while unconscious. Trevor ran 10,000 simulations and concluded that humans were simultaneously the safest and most dangerous species in the universe, then shut down for 3 hours to process the paradox. I finally put my foot down, metaphorically speaking, as my species doesn't have feet, and insisted we start actual research. We're scientists, I declared, not paranoid conspiracy theorists. We need real data, not wild speculation about human danger levels. The team agreed, reluctantly. We would begin with direct observation of a single human specimen in a controlled environment. What could possibly go wrong? In retrospect, that question was tempting fate. But then again, studying humans has taught me that tempting fate is practically a scientific method for their species. Perhaps we were already learning more than we realized. At least the council was paying us well for this assignment. Though considering what happened next, no amount of credits could have adequately compensated for what we were about to discover about Earth's primary sentient species and their peculiar relationship with both danger and common sense. I should have stayed with the crystalline beings. At least when they dissolved their mates, they had the decency to follow predictable chemical equations. First contact follies. Our first attempt at human observation was, to put it diplomatically, a disaster. Dr. Wurble insisted on using their latest invention, microscopic stealth drones disguised as common Earth insects. Humans won't suspect a thing, they assured us confidently. They failed to account for two crucial factors. First, that humans have an inexplicable tendency to name clearly robotic objects, and second, that Earth insects don't typically fly in perfect geometric formations. "Look at those weird mosquitoes flying in a pentagon," our first observed human said, pointing directly at our surveillance formation. "I'm going to name them the Drone Squad." Trevor had another existential crisis. They shouldn't have noticed that. The probability of a human detecting the pattern was 0.074%. "Did you factor in human boredom?" I asked. "Is that a variable?" "It's the variable." After the drone debacle, we decided to take a more direct approach. The council approved our request to bring a human specimen aboard for controlled study. Our selection criteria were simple. We needed someone who wouldn't panic at the sight of aliens, wouldn't try to take over the ship, and ideally wouldn't immediately try to mate with any of the crew. We'd read their science fiction and had concerns. We found Dave. Dave was a night shift convenience store worker who, when our tractor beam pulled him up mid-smoke break, simply took another drag of his cigarette and said, "Well, this might as well happen." Dr. Pip nearly fainted. That's not the correct response to abduction. Dr. Wurble had already activated all 17 containment fields, which created a fascinating light show that Dave seemed to appreciate. He stood in the center of our lab, surrounded by enough security measures to hold a supernova, and asked if we had any snacks. "Subject appears unnaturally calm," Dr. Pip dictated into their research log. "Possibly a sign of advanced military training or severe sleep deprivation." "Nah," Dave said, somehow hearing them through the quantum-proof barriers. "I just work retail. After the third armed robbery, you kind of stop being surprised by stuff." This prompted an emergency team meeting. "It regularly faces armed combat situations," Dr. Wurble shrieked, adding an 18th containment field. "And survives them by being." Bored, Trevor attempted to process this information and briefly displayed the blue screen of death. I decided to take control of the situation. "Dave," I addressed our specimen, "we are a scientific research team studying dangerous species." "Cool," Dave replied, sitting cross-legged in his containment field. "So what dangerous species are you studying?" "You, actually. Humans." Dave looked around at the multiple force fields, the array of sensors, and our heavily armored observation booth. He burst out laughing. "Oh man, you guys have been reading our movies, haven't you?" "We've been studying all available data on human behavior," I explained primly. "Let me guess, you saw how we survived ice ages, wars, and multiple mass extinction events, and figured we must be some kind of super dangerous species." "You say that as if surviving multiple extinction-level events is normal," Dr. Pip interjected. Dave shrugged. "I mean, have you met cockroaches? They're way more hardcore than us. We just got lucky and figured out tools. Speaking of tools, anyone got a lighter? Mine floated away during the beam-up thing." Dr. Wurble almost had an aneurysm when Dave mentioned wanting access to fire. 3 more containment fields went up, bringing our total to 21. The energy drain dimmed lights across 3 decks. "Perhaps we should start with some basic questions," I suggested, trying to maintain some semblance of scientific protocol. "What would you say makes humans dangerous?" "Depends," Dave said, examining his cigarette mournfully. "Are we talking individually or as a species? Because individually, I once saw a guy fight a lamppost because he thought it was giving him attitude. But as a species, we did figure out how to make sandwiches, which is pretty cool." Trevor's processors made a concerning whirring noise, fighting inanimate objects. Not listed in any known combat databases. Updating threat assessment. The lamppost guy was drunk, Dave added helpfully. "That's another thing we do. We discovered that if you let fruit rot in just the right way, it makes your brain funny. Then we decided to keep doing it on purpose." Dr. Pip's notes became increasingly frantic. Dr. Wurble began designing containment field number 22. And I sat there, watching our human specimen draw smiley faces in the condensation on the inner force field, wondering if perhaps we were approaching this entire study from the wrong angle. "Dave," I said carefully, "would you be willing to help us understand humans better, as a sort of cultural advisor?" "Sure," he replied. My shift doesn't start until midnight anyway. But first, seriously, got any snacks? Being abducted by aliens makes you hungry. And that's how our formal scientific study turned into what Dave called hanging out. The council would not be pleased. But then again, they're the ones who wanted to understand humans. They really should have been more specific about their methods. The experiment goes sideways. Day one of our official human observation period began with Dr. Wurble presenting their enhanced security protocol for human containment, a 2,347-page document that mostly consisted of increasingly specific ways to say don't let the human touch anything. Dave sat through the entire presentation, occasionally raising his hand to ask questions like, "So, what happens if I need to use the bathroom?" which sent Dr. Wurble into a panic spiral about human biological warfare capabilities. We eventually settled on a compromise. Dave would be allowed limited movement within a designated safe zone, which was surrounded by only 15 containment fields, instead of the original 22. A progress of sorts. For today's test, I announced, we'll observe how the subject interacts with various objects from human civilization. We started simple: a rubber ball. Our sensors were calibrated to detect any attempt to weaponize it. Dr. Wurble had somehow convinced themselves that humans could turn anything into a bomb. Dave bounced the ball against the wall for 20 minutes, humming something he called elevator music. Trevor recorded every bounce, trying to detect a pattern. There wasn't one. This bothered Trevor more than it probably should have. The subject appears to be engaging in repetitive behavior with no clear purpose, Dr. Pip noted. "Nah," Dave said, catching the ball. "I'm just bored. You guys should see what humans do when we're really bored. Ever hear about the guy who counted to 1,000,000 on YouTube?" This led to a 30-minute explanation of YouTube, during which Dr. Pip had to lie down. The next incident occurred during our attempt to understand human tool use. We provided Dave with a selection of common Earth objects: a pencil, a paperclip, and a rubber band. Within 5 minutes, he had constructed a miniature catapult. Fascinating, I noted, while Dr. Wurble hyperventilated in the corner. "Is this a common human defense mechanism?" "Nope," Dave grinned, launching a tiny paper projectile that bounced harmlessly off containment field number 7. "This is what we call goofing off. We used to do this in school all the time." "You practiced weapons construction in your educational facilities?" Dr. Pip asked faintly. "I mean, not officially. But you try staying focused in algebra." Trevor, who had been quietly processing this information, suddenly spoke up. Query: why would humans deliberately avoid acquiring knowledge? "Oh, we want the knowledge," Dave explained, now trying to balance a pencil on his nose. "We just also want to do literally anything else at the same time. It's called multitasking." "That's not what multitasking means," Trevor protested. "It is if you're brave enough." The real chaos began when we attempted to study human problem-solving capabilities. We presented Dave with a logic puzzle designed for juvenile centaurians. It was supposed to take 3 hours to solve. Dave stared at it for approximately 45 seconds, then asked, "Have you guys tried just pushing this bit here?" The puzzle, which was supposed to be impossible to solve without completing all 12 stages in order, clicked open. "That's cheating," Trevor announced, clearly distressed. "Nah, that's efficiency," Dave countered. "Why take the long way when you can take the weird way?" "Because the long way's the correct way." Says who? Says logic. Logic is more like guidelines anyway. Trevor had to be rebooted after that conversation. Things really went sideways during the physical capability tests. We wanted to establish baseline human strength and endurance levels. We had carefully calibrated equipment, detailed measurement protocols, and extensive safety procedures. What we hadn't counted on was human stubbornness. "Subject appears to be exceeding normal endurance parameters," Dr. Pip reported nervously, watching Dave continue running on the treadmill well past the predicted point of exhaustion. "How are you still going?" I asked. Spite, Dave panted. "Also, I'm trying to beat my high score." "This isn't a game." "There is no score." "There is now. I just made one up." Dr. Wurble, who had been monitoring the situation from behind 3 separate blast shields, finally spoke up. "But why continue past the point of discomfort?" Dave grinned, sweat dripping down his face. "Because you said I couldn't." The entire research team sat in stunned silence as the implications of this statement sank in. "Are you suggesting," I said slowly, "that humans will deliberately push past their normal limitations, simply because someone said they couldn't do something?" "Hold that thought," Dave wheezed. "2 more minutes and I'll have beaten my cousin's best time. He said I couldn't run for an hour straight. That was 3 years ago. He doesn't even remember saying it. But I remember. We had to physically shut down the treadmill to make him stop." Later that evening, during our team debrief, Dr. Pitt presented their preliminary findings. Humans appear to operate on a system of logic that isn't actually logical, follow rules by finding ways around them, and derive motivation from proving others wrong. "Don't forget the part where they invent games during serious scientific tests," Trevor added, still slightly glitchy from their earlier crash. "And they can turn anything into a weapon," Dr. Wurble muttered, eyeing the rubber band catapult that now sat in our highest security containment unit. I looked through the observation window at Dave, who was teaching himself to juggle with some spare lab equipment he'd found. "I don't think we're asking the right questions," I said finally. "We keep trying to understand what makes humans dangerous by our standards. But maybe we need to understand how they define danger." "They don't," Dr. Wurble exclaimed. "That's the problem. They look at clearly dangerous things and decide they're fun." From the other room, we heard Dave say "oops," followed by a small crash. Dr. Wurble activated containment fields 16 through 20, just in case. I made a note in my official log. Day 1 of human observation has raised more questions than answers. Subject continues to defy standard testing protocols through what appears to be a combination of boredom, creativity, and what they call just messing around. Further study is clearly needed. Assuming our research facility survives the experience, in retrospect, we probably should have been more worried about that last part, the coffee incident. One of the fundamental rules of scientific research is to maintain strict control over your test environment. No unauthorized substances, no unplanned variables, and absolutely no unknown chemical compounds. We broke all of these rules the day Dave introduced us to coffee. It started innocently enough. Dave had been with us for several days, cheerfully disrupting every experiment we attempted, when we noticed him becoming increasingly sluggish and irritable. "Subject appears to be entering some form of deteriorative state," Dr. Pitt reported, watching Dave stare blankly at a wall for 10 minutes straight. "Fine," Dave mumbled. "Just need coffee." "Coffee." Trevor pulled up Earth's database. "Ah, a beverage made from roasted and ground seeds, containing various alkaloids including significant amounts of caffeine, a known psychoactive compound." A pause. "Wait. Humans intentionally consume psychoactive compounds for breakfast." "Not just breakfast," Dave yawned. "Pretty much all day. Got any?" Dr. Wurble, naturally, was horrified. "You want us to provide you with mind-altering substances?" "Look," Dave said, with the patience of someone explaining quantum physics to a potato, "humans run on coffee. It's like starter fluid for people. Without it, we're basically just tall, grumpy houseplants." After much debate and 17 new safety protocols, we agreed to synthesize some coffee using our molecular replicator. Dave took one sip and made a face that suggested we'd somehow managed to violate several laws of physics. "This isn't coffee," he declared. "This is sad bean water. You need real coffee." Which is how we ended up sending a stealth probe to Earth to acquire what Dave assured us was the good stuff. Dr. Wurble insisted on scanning each individual coffee bean for weapons potential. The moment the coffee maker started brewing under triple containment, of course, something remarkable happened. Dave's entire demeanor changed. His nostrils flared, his eyes focused, and he began what we would later identify as the coffee zombie shuffle toward the source of the aroma. "Subject appears to be responding to olfactory stimuli with unprecedented intensity," Dr. Pitt noted. "Coffee," Dave moaned, pressing against the containment field. What followed was the most thorough documentation of human transformation since Bruce Banner. The moment Dave took his first sip of real coffee, his entire system seemed to reboot. "Oh yeah," he sighed contentedly. "That's the stuff. Fascinating," I observed. "The stimulant appears to restore normal human function. The subject is willingly consuming a bitter, hot liquid that contains multiple psychoactive compounds," Trevor pointed out. "How is this normal function?" Wait until I tell you about energy drinks, Dave grinned, already reaching for a second cup. Dr. Wurble's security sensors began registering elevated heart rates. The subject's cardiovascular activity is increasing. Yeah, that's the point, Dave said, downing his third cup. Gotta get that buzz. You're intentionally inducing a physiological response, Dr. Pip asked, frantically taking notes. The best part is when you hit the sweet spot between totally wired and can see through time, Dave explained, pouring his fourth cup. We watched in horrified fascination as Dave consumed cup after cup, his speech getting progressively faster and more animated. By cup 6, he was explaining his theory about whether fish get thirsty. By cup 8, he had solved 3 of our ship's engineering problems, though his solutions violated several laws of physics. Should we stop him? Dr. Pip whispered as Dave reached for cup number 9. I don't think we can, I replied, watching our human vibrate at a frequency previously thought impossible for organic matter. Just one more cup, Dave assured us, his eyes now containing what appeared to be their own light source. I know when to stop. That was when Trevor made their fatal error. Our calculations suggest you have exceeded safe human caffeine consumption levels by 47%. Dave paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Oh really? Watch this. Dr. Wurble activated every containment field we had, but it was too late. We could only watch as Dave chugged the entire pot's remaining contents while maintaining direct eye contact with Trevor. In my official report to the Galactic Council, I described the ensuing events as a demonstration of human resilience and adaptability. In my personal notes, I wrote, "Oh dear God, why?" We learned several important things that day. 1. Humans will absolutely do something just because you said they shouldn't. 2. The human capacity for stimulant consumption far exceeds any logical limits. 3. Coffee makers should be classified as weapons of mass destruction. Most importantly, we learned that humans don't just survive on spite and stimulants, they thrive on them. The Council was not pleased when they received our requisition form for a new AI assistant. Trevor may never be the same. The revelation. At Poi, it was during our mandatory post-coffee incident recovery period that everything finally clicked. We were all sitting in the observation room, watching Dave teach himself to moonwalk, a form of locomotion that, as far as we could tell, served absolutely no practical purpose, when Dr. Pip suddenly sat up straight. I've got it, they announced. We've been looking at this all wrong. Subject continues to defy gravity for entertainment purposes, Dr. Wurble muttered, still traumatized from the coffee incident. Exactly, Dr. Pip exclaimed. Look at everything we've documented. Humans don't follow any of the standard danger protocols. I reviewed our findings. They deliberately seek out substances that alter their consciousness. They intentionally consume foods that cause pain. They continue physical activities well past the point of exhaustion. They solve problems by breaking the parameters. They do things specifically because they're told they can't. They turn everything into either a game or a weapon, often both. They run on spite and bean juice. Conventional danger follows rules, Dr. Pip continued, growing more excited. Predators hunt for food. Viruses replicate. Supernovas explode. But humans do things for fun that other species do for survival. Through the observation window, Dave had graduated from moonwalking to attempting something he called the worm. They're not dangerous because they're strong or fast or naturally weaponized, I said slowly, understanding dawning. They're dangerous because they're unpredictable. Trevor, still slightly glitchy from excessive coffee exposure, sparked slightly. That explains why my probability calculations keep failing. You can't predict chaos. Not just chaos, Dr. Pip corrected. Intentional chaos. They actively seek it out. Remember what Dave said about being bored. We all shuddered, remembering the rubber band incident. So what you're saying, Dr. Wurble interjected, is that all our safety protocols were useless, I finished, because we were trying to protect against logical dangers. Humans operate on an entirely different system. What system is that? Trevor asked. From the other room we heard Dave say, "Hey, watch this," followed by a sound that should not have been possible with the materials available. That system, I sighed. Dr. Pip was frantically documenting their revelation. Humans appear to possess a unique relationship with danger, treating it not as a threat but as a challenge. They have evolved not to avoid dangerous situations, but to seek them out and more like they pocket-adopted danger and taught it tricks. I observed, watching Dave juggle with objects that definitely weren't meant to be juggled. Query Trevor buzzed. If humans actively seek out and manipulate dangerous situations, does that make them more or less dangerous than a conventionally dangerous species? We all pondered this while Dave, having run out of new things to do with the available objects, began teaching himself to whistle through his fingers. Both Dr. Wurble decided. They're less dangerous because they're not actively trying to harm anyone, but more dangerous because they might accidentally reshape reality while trying to cure their boredom. They're quantum dangerous, Dr. Pip suggested. Until you observe them, they exist in a superposition of maximum and minimum threat levels. I watched as Dave, now successfully whistling, attempted to teach the ship's cleaning bot to dance. The bot, despite having no programming for such activities, was somehow learning. I think I understand now, I said. The Galactic Council asked us to determine what makes humans dangerous, but that's like trying to determine what makes water wet. It's not any one thing, it's the fundamental nature of what they are. And what are they? Trevor asked. Just then, Dave managed to get the cleaning bot to do a perfect pirouette. He celebrated by attempting a backflip, despite having no prior gymnastics training. They're the universe's way of asking what if I replied, and then immediately doing it before anyone can say please don't. Dr. Pip added one final note to their research log in conclusion. Humans appear to be powered by a unique combination of curiosity, caffeine, and the unshakable belief that rules are more like suggestions. They are not dangerous in any way we can adequately prepare for, because they are not dangerous in any way that makes sense. So what do we tell the council? Dr. Wurble asked. I watched Dave high-five the cleaning bot, teaching it yet another thing it definitely wasn't designed to do. We tell them the truth, I said. Humans aren't dangerous because of what they can do. They're dangerous because they never stop to ask if they should. The report. Official report, Human Danger Assessment, Galactic Council of Sciences classification, mostly harmless but deeply concerning. Researcher Professor Quix Brightbeam, status requesting immediate vacation and therapy. Esteemed council members. Following our extensive research period studying human behavior, I am pleased and slightly terrified to present our findings. Before I begin, I would like to note that our research facility requires extensive repairs. We need a new AI assistant, and Dr. Wurble has requested reassignment to studying black holes, which they now consider more predictable. Our initial hypothesis that humans represent a conventional form of danger has proven to be dramatically incorrect. Humans are not dangerous in the way that predators are dangerous or the way that natural disasters are dangerous, or even the way that politicians are dangerous. Humans represent an entirely new category of danger that I propose we call chaotic neutral with coffee. Key findings. 1. Humans do not follow the laws of nature so much as politely consider them, and then decide to try something else anyway. 2. Their primary motivations appear to be, oh curiosity, what happens if? Oh spite, watch me. Oh boredom, hold my beer. Oh, the pursuit of substances that should, by all scientific logic, be toxic to them. 3. Standard containment protocols are ineffective because humans view them not as barriers but as interesting puzzles to solve while procrastinating on other tasks. 4. They have evolved to run on a mixture of stimulants, sleep deprivation, and sheer determination. Our test subject once stayed awake for 36 hours because he wanted to know if he could. He then immediately attempted to teach our security system to play tic-tac-toe. Threat assessment. Humans represent what I would call a quantum paradox of danger. They are simultaneously the least and most dangerous species we have ever encountered. They are least dangerous because they generally mean well and have a remarkable capacity for kindness. They are most dangerous because they do not operate within any known parameters of logical behavior. We consider when faced with a deadly situation, most species either fight or flee. Humans invented parkour. Recommendations. 1. Do not, under any circumstances, tell humans they cannot do something. This activates what our research team has termed the "oh yeah, watch this" response. 2. Never underestimate their ability to turn anything into either a game or a weapon, usually both simultaneously. 3. If humans express boredom, evacuate the area immediately. 4. Classification of coffee as a controlled substance is futile. They will simply invent something worse. 5. Do not attempt to predict human behavior. Our AI tried and is now convinced that humans are a glitch in the matrix. In conclusion, after extensive study, we have determined that humans are not dangerous because of their capabilities, but because of their complete inability to accept limitations. They do not overcome obstacles through superior strength or speed, but through a unique combination of creativity, stubbornness, and what they call winging it. They are the only known species that views the laws of physics as a personal challenge. The good news is that humans are generally not hostile unless provoked. The bad news is that they consider being told something is impossible as provocation. Final recommendation. I propose we classify humans as mostly harmless but deeply concerning and adopt a policy of careful observation while maintaining a safe distance. Not because they might attack us, but because they might try to teach us their version of fun. A personal addendum. I would like to note that our test subject Dave has asked if he can keep in touch and wants to know if we're interested in joining his weekly game night. I am simultaneously touched by this offer of friendship and terrified of what humans consider games. Respectfully submitted, Professor Quix Brightbeam PS. If anyone needs me, I will be taking an extended vacation somewhere quiet, preferably without coffee. PS. Dave, if you're reading this and knowing humans, you've probably found a way to. Thanks for not breaking too many laws of physics. And yes, I suppose we can stay in touch. But please, no more energy drinks. Attached 2,347 pages of incident reports, 14 hours of video footage marked weird human stuff, and one slightly traumatized AI's attempt to calculate the probability of human behavior, which just reads error does not compute repeated 10,000 times.